Episode 91, Rock Climbing Club.
Jacob, since you seem to be having amazing luck with the ladies, breakfast should be on you, Sam shouted as he ran after Jacob.
You idiot! All you ever think about is food. Fine, I will pay, Jacob responded loudly. All of them had breakfast in the cafeteria that Jacob paid for. He didn't get anything for himself, as he had already eaten at Sophie's place. After they finished eating, they went straight to class. As always, their morning classes were long and boring, so they were glad that they had a break in the next hour. At 11 o'clock, their morning class ended, and they had 2 hours in between until their next class, which was to start at 1. The group was indecisive about how to spend their time. They were torn between going to the internet cafe or going back to the dorm. Since their lunchtime also needed to be taken into consideration, they found the 2 hours to be less than sufficient to travel back and forth. Hey, I've heard that the rock climbing club is very popular among girls, one of the guys said. So? Jacob asked, confused by the random fact. They are recruiting today. I bet there will be a lot of beautiful girls joining. Why don't we go take a look? The guy suggested.
Rock climbing? Isn't that Michael's turf? Sam said.
What are you afraid of, Sam? Isn't your family so powerful that even the players on the basketball team had to offer you compensation and apologies? Let's go take a look. Michael won't dare do anything to us, another one insisted. Sam rolled his eyes at the remark. He thought about it a bit and agreed.
All right, let's go check it out. Hopefully, it'll be worth spending an hour there so we can go for lunch by the time we come back. Jacob, let's go together.
Yeah, okay, let's go. Jacob nodded. We're just going to take a look. Even if Michael is there, I don't think he'll cause a scene, Jacob thought. Let's not get Ryan and the others, just us 4, his roommate added. He felt that the more people he went with, the fewer chances he would have with the girls there. As they finally settled on a decision, the 4 grabbed their belongings and hurried towards their destination. When they arrived at the room designated for the rock climbing club, they found that there were already over 100 boys swarming the area. Moreover, Ryan and the others, whom they were trying to avoid, were also in the crowd. They were standing on tiptoes and craning their necks forward. Damn, they came to see the pretty girls without telling us, Jacob's roommate exclaimed as he was irked by the sight of their classmates and dorm friends. His hypocritical behavior made Jacob feel at a loss for words. He shook his head. Nudging Jacob with his elbow while curling his lips, Sam signaled to Jacob to pay attention to the other side of the crowd. As Jacob looked in the direction that Sam pointed out, he saw Kathy, her roommate, and a few other girls in the crowd. At the same time, another guy pointed in a different direction while poking Jacob. Jacob turned around and saw a man with a strong build and giant-like body. It was Kyle, the captain of the basketball team. His height, which was over 2 meters, made him stand out like a towering monument in the flood of people. Jacob felt a hint of contempt towards Kyle, who was usually extremely occupied, for showing up here. Jacob knew he was right about the fact that the basketball team and the rock climbing club were birds of a feather. By now, Kathy was looking at Jacob, as she had also noticed his presence. But when she saw that Jacob was staring straight at her older brother, her heart sank a little. Seeing that more and more students were rushing to join the crowd from all directions, Michael took charge as the president of the club. He stood next to the rock climbing wall and spoke into a mic.
Today's recruitment day for the rock climbing club. Our club is the biggest one at our university and currently consists of over 300 boy students and 200 girl students. Those who have joined our club are all sports lovers. The rock climbing club not only provides indoor and outdoor training at the stadium, but also sometimes organizes trips into the wild. In addition, the equipment that you purchase from us is guaranteed to be priced lower than those you will find in the sports shops out there.
His voice was sonorous, and his tone was mild and gentle. Moreover, he was good-looking and confident. If one only knew him on the surface, they would surely have taken him for a polite, friendly, and poised senior student. However, Jacob knew very well how rude and arrogant Michael was, and how he lost his temper when he lost the race to Jacob. Even though many of the junior students were tempted by the list of benefits the rock climbing club had promised, none had hastily gone over to sign up.
There's no rush. We will first showcase our techniques today.
Michael handed the mic over to a skinny, dark-skinned student next to him and shot him a look. That guy held up the mic and continued. I am the vice captain of the rock climbing club. I will demonstrate some of the techniques required for rock climbing. He held the mic and began explaining what was required for the club, and one by one, he put on the different types of gear needed for the climb. Afterward, he moved to the bottom of the rock climbing wall and put down the mic. He then raised his voice and used his limbs to demonstrate the proper climbing positions. Many of the students who had no experience with rock climbing became intrigued and were paying attention closely. However, the guys were getting impatient. Where are the pretty girls? Someone murmured. Suddenly, Michael clapped his hands. Following his clapping, 4 beautiful girls who were wearing athletic gear came out from behind the rock climbing wall. Instantly, their elegant figures and charming faces dazzled all the boy students.
Now, 4 of our members will take over and demonstrate the process of a climb to you from start to finish.
Michael picked up the mic once again. Everyone's eyes lit up as the beautiful girls appeared. Jacob noticed Lisa amongst the 4 girls who had stepped forward. She was the most popular girl in their college. She had also joined the rock climbing club and appeared to be very confident as she got ready to climb the wall. This is no surprise. Lisa is after Michael, and joining the club run by him was a wise move to catch his interest. Likewise, Michael's interest was to pull in as many beautiful girls as possible to help him attract other students. There was no reason for him to reject her application either, Jacob thought. Facing the rock climbing wall, the 4 girls got ready to demonstrate rock climbing to everyone. After making sure their safety harnesses were tightly secured, they grasped onto the colorful rocks and began moving upwards. Gradually, they had climbed up so high that the audience had to stretch their necks to see them. Most of the boys were mesmerized by the girls' demonstration and were watching them climb up with keen interest. The female students, on the other hand, were offended by this unnecessary show to attract more people to the club. Jacob looked at the demonstration for a little while and then got bored. He looked at his roommates and found all of them staring at the girls with rapt attention, as if some magic was going to happen, especially the one who had suggested going there in the first place. Using beautiful girls as their marketing strategy, I wonder how many boys are going to fall for that, Jacob pondered as he observed the boys around him. Episode 92, 15-meter wall. One by one, all 4 girls reached the top of the wall. Then they descended by sliding down the ropes. Their confidence and ease convinced the onlookers that rock climbing wasn't that hard. They made the other girls want to be fit like them, and the guys, well, they simply wanted to have a chance to hang out with them by joining the club. The students who were hesitating earlier had made up their minds and rushed to sign up for the club.
Did they hire these girls from outside the college?
Sam asked suspiciously. Jacob shook his head as he disagreed. Although he disliked Michael, he believed that Michael could easily charm some beautiful girls into joining his club. Now that the girls had finished the demonstration, Michael arranged for their brawny male members to demonstrate accelerated rock climbing. Their agile movements further convinced their male audience that rock climbing could help them become strong and athletic.
To join our club, you first have to pay a $100 registration fee. After the orientation next week, you will join us for group training,
Michael announced into the mic as the members helped the students with their registration.
After signing up for his club, group training costs $50. Then there's the official training where formal gear needs to be purchased. It would cost another $100 to $150. If you decide to quit, the registration fee and training fee won't be refunded."
Sam explained the procedure to Jacob quietly. "Now I know how the rock climbing club has become the biggest club at our university, by robbing students," Jacob sneered. "The money that they collect from their members would go into these seniors' pockets." Apparently, this club's bullying incidents have been reported to the authorities before. However, as Michael was the son of the deputy mayor and disputes involving clubs could get very complicated, the college wanted nothing to do with it. The students who wanted to sign up for the club were done with their registrations, but Michael wasn't satisfied and wanted to attract more students. He spoke into the mic once again.
"Since today is the recruitment day for our club, we will make an exception and allow students who are not members of the club to try climbing this wall. Usually, this wall is off limits to anyone outside the club."
He added,
"And to make things interesting, we're going to take this one step further. Only the 10-meter wall was used in the demonstrations. If you would like to try the wall, you will have to climb this 15-meter wall. The first person to reach the top will be rewarded with this amazing set of gears."
Michael pointed at the set of black sports gears of a famous brand that were placed neatly on the table behind him. The announcement greatly excited some of the students, yet no one was willing to be the first one to try it. After all, a lot of students were in the audience, especially so many beautiful girls. Recklessly going forward might result in extreme embarrassment if they fail to perform even a little bit. The 15-meter wall was the standard for rock climbing competitions. For people who had never been trained in rock climbing, it was impossible to reach the top. In addition, the holds from the bottom to the top were few and farther away. The difficulty level was incredibly high. Jacob's tallest friend wanted to try it, but he knew that although he had a body that was tall and lean, he was also frail. After careful consideration, he finally decided not to try out. On the other hand, Sam, who had the best physique and was the most interested in sports of the four, had now become eager. Ryan and the others noticed Sam. Seeing that he was full of excitement and was rubbing his hands together, they immediately began egging him on. "Go, Sam!" Since those guys were all good friends with Sam, they started cheering for him together. Feeling acclaimed by his friends, Sam could only step up and walk towards the wall. "All right, let me try," he said. As Sam walked forward, Michael recognized him. He knew this guy was one of Jacob's friends and felt slightly agitated. But he suppressed his anger in front of the audience and pretended to be encouraging.
"Great, let's applaud the courage of our first warrior."
The crowd gave a round of scattered applause. In fact, the crowd was very skeptical about Sam reaching the top, as he was not very tall. Promptly, the vice captain of the rock climbing club began helping Sam put on all the safety gear. He then guided him to the bottom of the 15-meter wall. All eyes were on Sam. Standing there, Sam took a deep breath and looked up at the sparsely colored climbing holds. Then, he lifted his right foot and stepped onto the first hold while grabbing the other holds with both of his hands. He began ascending. "You can do it, Sam!" Ryan cheered loudly. Following Ryan, the other guys in their class also started yelling out random cheers. Soon, Sam had already climbed 1/3 of the wall and was 5 meters high. He turned and waved at Ryan and the others confidently. Yet, the most challenging part about rock climbing was that the higher you climb on the wall, the more difficult it became. It was not only due to physical exertion, but also the fact that the design and placement of the holds became trickier. As Sam was not very tall, he also didn't know the proper technique, and the holds were becoming farther and farther apart from one another. He was having problems grabbing onto them. In an attempt to grab the next hold, Sam made a small jump in the air, grabbed onto a hold with his right hand, and quickly moved his left foot to another hold. He hung onto the rock wall and let out a deep sigh of relief. By then, 5 minutes had passed. Jacob, Kathy, and the others who were watching with their necks craning up were filled with worry. On the other hand, Michael, who was standing by the table, was shocked to see Sam, who had never received any systemic training, climb so high. He had thought that Sam would fail and embarrass himself in front of all the people. "Way to go, Sam!" Originally, Ryan was hoping to see Sam fail so that he could tease him about it, but now, stretching his neck, he was just amazed at the fact that Sam had already climbed 2/3 of the wall. After briefly shaking his sore fingers and shoulders, Sam continued climbing up. Seeing that things were not going as he expected, Michael gave the vice captain a meaningful glance. By now, Sam had climbed more than 10 meters high and had encountered a very challenging hold. Adjusting his breathing, he decided to try the same method, reaching the hold with the help of a small jump. Jacob also became nervous and was holding his breath. He always thought Sam was good at playing basketball, but didn't know that he was gifted in other sports as well. He was watching with rapt attention as Sam made a move to climb higher. Aiming right at the hold, Sam made his jump. Right at this moment, the harness that was supporting him swayed a little. It was hard to maintain one's balance midair in the first place, and this slight sway had caused Sam to lose his balance completely. His right hand was able to reach the hold, but it was unable to sustain the grip. As a result, he instantly lost support and fell from the wall. Moreover, the rope that was supposed to support the climber did not start pulling in time. Seeing this, Jacob dashed out of the crowd and sprinted forward. He threw himself over and reached out his arms, attempting to catch Sam. While Sam was losing his wits from the 10-meter free fall, the rope that was attached to his harness finally began pulling. Even so, Sam was still falling. Right before he fell into Jacob's arms, the rope finally stabilized and reduced most of the impact from the fall. Dragging the rope, Sam was now standing on the ground and his face was ghastly pale. Likewise, Kathy, who was standing right at the front of the crowd, had witnessed the whole course of Sam's climb closely. She was now covered with cold sweat. She was trying to calm her heart by placing her hands over it. With his eyes sharper than ever, Jacob noticed the unusual movement of the rope. He knew something was wrong. Others might not be able to tell and might think that the rope was swaying because Sam had made a jump, but Jacob knew very well that the rope was tampered with. However, he had no evidence to prove it, and most of the people in this crowd were Michael's fans, who would never believe him. Letting go of his arms that were supporting Sam's shoulders, Jacob turned to Michael. With rage fueling in his eyes, he raised his arm, pointed his finger at Michael, and declared, "You, let's have a match." Episode 93. Second time's a charm.
Oh?
Michael pretended to be surprised and said,
You want to compete with me?
Everyone else, including the members of the rock climbing club, were astonished when Jacob challenged Michael. Jacob didn't say anything more. He just stared at Michael.
Get him set up.
Michael ordered his vice captain, clenched his fists, and said to Jacob,
If you want to play, let's play.
The vice captain immediately got to work and harnessed Jacob, obeying Michael's orders. Although Jacob had challenged their captain, the guy was careful when it came to all the safety precautions, since it was a matter of life and death. With an angry expression on his face, Jacob spread his arms for the harness silently. On the other hand, several girls, especially the popular ones from the club, surrounded Michael and put the harness on him, which made the other guys in the audience jealous. Kathy, who was standing right in the front of the crowd, hesitated for several seconds before walking over. "Jacob, don't compete with him. It is too dangerous," she said. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Seeing concern on Kathy's face, Jacob tried to reassure her. "Rock climbing is a dangerous sport. Michael is a professional, and you have never even tried it before. You will put yourself in grave danger if you act rashly." Kathy tried to dissuade him while shaking her head in disagreement. She was concerned not only because Jacob was her classmate, but also...
"Kathy, don't interfere. If his mental state is disturbed because of your discouragement, there will be a higher probability of accidents occurring. If that happens, you may need to take responsibility for the accident,"
Michael said to Kathy as he buckled up his harness. His words sounded well-intentioned, but they caused Kathy to worry even more. It would be far too easy for him to make anything look like an accident here. This was his turf, after all. She glanced at Jacob with concern and looked at Ryan and his friends, wishing they would join her efforts in stopping him. But the truth was that the guys would never back off from a challenge, even if they were too afraid. And in this case, Jacob had declared the challenge himself, and all the boys had enough pride to not stop him from moving forward. "Kathy, just wait and watch. I'll be fine." Jacob felt touched because of Kathy's concern, but he wasn't going to quit, and he didn't have the time to keep reassuring her. He was still burning with rage. He felt the bracelets on his wrists getting heavier, but right now, he was too fueled up to let them slow him down. Feeling resigned, Kathy looked at her older brother, Kyle, who towered over the crowd. Right now, he was watching the whole thing without an ounce of emotion and in complete silence. "The competition is about to begin. For safety reasons, everyone please move back a little and watch from outside the boundary." One of the members of the club walked over and ushered Kathy and a few others away from the wall. 3 belayers held Michael's safety rope, and Jacob got the same treatment. The competition was about to begin when Ryan suddenly rushed closer to the wall and said, "We will act as the belayers for Jacob. We don't trust you guys." Ryan was quite dominating among the sophomore guys. Several friends of Jacob followed suit and rushed in. After witnessing Sam's failure a few moments ago, they lost trust in the members of the rock climbing club. They'd rather keep the rope in their own hands. The club members had no choice but to walk over and demonstrate how to control the rope and what to do if the climber fell. Finally, Ryan and 2 other guys, who were the strongest among them, were left on site to be Jacob's belayers while the rest were asked to watch from outside. After the competitors were all set, the vice captain walked to the rock climbing wall and raised his stopwatch. "Ready, go," he shouted. Jacob and Michael put their hands on the rock climbing wall and began climbing at once. At this stage of rock climbing, a few seconds of difference at the beginning was not a big issue. The critical point was who could make it to the summit. Even if the competitors could all reach the top, there would be a difference of minutes between the first place and the second place. On the 15-meter rock climbing wall, Jacob was to the left of Michael, and they each chose their own route. Michael was very deft and climbed 3 meters in a short time. Although the positions of the holds were changing due to different levels of difficulty, he, as the captain of the rock climbing club, was quite familiar with these holds and knew the best route to the top. He was wearing an orange mesh vest that exposed his chiseled muscles, and the girls watching cheered at the sight. In contrast, Jacob was climbing steadily with his hands and feet tightly positioned on the holds, and his grip was firm. He wasn't dressed professionally like Michael, but he was steady and took a smart route choice. This made the students, even those who didn't know him, admire him a little. "Who's this guy? It was pretty bold of him to challenge the captain of the rock climbing club." "He's one of the closest friends of the guy who just fell. I guess he's doing this for his friend." "How can he defeat Michael, who's the best climber in the whole college?" "Don't you know that he's the guy who defeated Michael in the long-distance race in the school's athletic games?" The students in the crowd began to talk among themselves. Hearing the comments around her, Kathy continued being nervous as she observed Jacob. Her fingernails cut into her palms, and her heart was in her throat. She had been so worried only once before, when Jacob fought the basketball team. "This guy would surely give me a heart attack one day," she thought, while praying for his safety. By now, Michael had climbed half of the distance, while Jacob was only half a meter below him. The crowd was watching the match very keenly, not sure who to support. Both of them looked like professional athletes to untrained eyes. Michael had slowed down. After each step, he would pause to rest for several seconds while leaning against the wall. In a rock climbing race of this level, one needed steadiness, excellent techniques, and sound mental fitness to reach the top, and Michael had all of those. Jacob continued climbing steadily. He would calculate his route before making several moves. His heightened dragon senses were really helping him keep up with a pro like Michael.
"This guy's stamina is terrifyingly good,"
Michael thought as he looked down at Jacob, who was only half a meter lower than him. He recalled the last time they were pitted against one another at the athletic games. He felt enraged as he remembered how humiliating it was to lose to a mere sophomore like him. He was now all the more determined to show Jacob his real place this time around. He wanted to prove that Jacob had only been lucky the last time, and he wasn't better than Michael. From a professional viewpoint, Jacob's choices of holds were not excellent. They were energy-consuming and challenging to reach. Despite that, Jacob was still closely following his competitor.
"Is he a monster or what?"
Michael's face turned grim at the thought. Looking up at the remaining 8 meters, he inhaled deeply and resumed climbing cautiously. If he made a mistake and fell, the lucky sophomore would win the competition. He had just grabbed another hold above him when Jacob suddenly signaled to his belayers that he was going down. Michael smirked arrogantly and thought,
"He has finally exhausted his strength."
He silently mocked.
"Well, you are just average. Even though you were lucky enough to win against me in that one race, there's no way you can beat me in rock climbing."
Seeing Jacob's hand gesture, Ryan and the other 2 belayers immediately slacked the rope and pulled Jacob down. "I'm not finished. You go on climbing." Back on the ground, Jacob raised his head and yelled when he saw that Michael's belayers also wanted to loosen the rope. Michael froze in surprise and thought,
"What the hell is this guy doing?"
Jacob murmured some words and took the silver bracelets off his wrists. He bent down and put them on the ground. Carrying 110 pounds on his arms while rock climbing was not an easy task. Besides, due to his bad mood, the burden on his arms seemed to have grown another 100 pounds or so. He remembered that Susan told him that he could take those bracelets off for 2 hours every day. Till now, he had not felt the need to remove them and had gotten quite used to the weight. But this time, he needed his full strength and couldn't have the extra weight pulling him down. Seeing Jacob casually going down just to remove 2 stupid bracelets caught Michael off guard, and he stood still, looking down. He forgot that he could climb further and gain an advantage over Jacob. As he swung his arms to relieve the tension, Jacob walked towards the wall once again. Episode 94. One More Climb. Jacob went to the wall to start climbing again and was immediately up half a meter. His friends cheered him on as he was faster and much more agile this time. Kathy kept her eyes glued to him as if she could save him from falling. Towering over the crowd, Kyle noted his sister's anxious expression. He then lowered his head and buried himself in deep thoughts. In the blink of an eye, Jacob was 2 meters up the wall. He took the same route, but had a faster speed. Everyone attributed his speed to his experience, which saved him time from thinking. No one knew that he had been climbing with a weight of 200 pounds tied to his wrists. Michael looked down and saw Jacob climbing up again. He was both surprised and contemptuous.
Idiot. Do you think your strength is inexhaustible? You will be grateful if you can cover half the height you did the last time, he thought.
He turned to look at the girls who were looking up at him in admiration, and he put more strength in his grips and thought,
well, I'll show you the strength of the captain of the rock climbing club.
He did it again. He got overconfident. While all of that was going on in Michael's head, Jacob was climbing up steadily, trying not to make mistakes. 5 minutes later, he was back at the same spot where he was the last time. Meanwhile, Michael had only managed to climb 3 meters. The higher he climbed, the more difficult it got. The holds were sparsely positioned and thus were difficult to reach and hold the grip. When Jacob was halfway up the first time, he had felt the sudden increase in difficulty, and that was why he decided to go back down to take off the bracelets. The 3 meters Michael had covered were difficult, but the toughest part was the last 3 meters near the summit. Jacob inhaled deeply, looked up at the uneven and protruding rock wall and the randomly placed colorful holds, and reached out his hand. After he grasped one hold, he tried to pull himself up. Seeing Jacob gaining on him, Michael panicked slightly. He was horrified by Jacob's increased strength. If he had known that Jacob had earlier been climbing with 200 extra pounds, he would have fallen in astonishment. Jacob was more cautious now. The last 6 meters required not only strength, but technique as well. Everyone on the ground was watching the competition with their hearts in their throats. Even the emotionless Kyle was focusing with all his attention on the race. Jacob was gaining on Michael. His sharp hearing picked up Michael's panting, even though this guy was showing everyone his confidence as if reaching the summit was just a piece of cake for him. Jacob looked up at the 2 holds above his head, not sure how to get to them. If he let go of one of his hands now, he would lose his balance and fall backward. The upper end of the rock wall had been designed to have a negative slope.
Whatever.
Jacob gritted his teeth, no longer caring about how Michael was planning to climb this part of the wall. He let go of one hand and immediately reached for another hold above him. Sure enough, gravity pulled him down. His whole body fell backward, and his feet could no longer touch the rock wall. He was suddenly in the air.
Oh!
The students on the ground all exclaimed in fear. Even with the safety rope, the precarious position over 10 meters in the air was frightening to look at. Ryan and the other 2 belayers gasped and tightened their grip on the rope with all their strength. To theirs and everyone else's astonishment, with just one of his hands on a hold, Jacob dangled in the air. He didn't fall and didn't run out of strength. Kyle's eyes lit up at this scene. Everyone began whispering among themselves, but Jacob suddenly bent his arm and began to pull himself up. The students watched as they continued to gasp in astonishment. When he pulled himself up to the limit with one arm, Jacob suddenly reached for a higher hold with the other hand. Wow! There was another wave of gasps. With both feet in the air, he climbed up with the sole strength of his upper body, one hold after another. No one made a sound because they were all stunned. After covering the portion of the wall that had a negative slope, Jacob was now at the same height as Michael. Jacob was wearing a cheap white vest, and the muscles that were exposed were not suntanned or strong-looking, but in the eyes of the students on the ground, he looked godlike. Michael was in a real panic now. Seeing that Jacob had caught up with him, he looked up at the hold above him and inhaled deeply before he reached for it. It didn't matter how hard he tried. He couldn't change the fact that Jacob went down after coming up halfway and still caught up with him. In people's eyes, Jacob was already the winner. Even if he could reach the summit before Jacob, It only meant that he was more skilled. Jacob was the one who had greater strength. The girls who had been looking up at Michael were all talking about Jacob now. The steady and tense competition between the two rivals continued. Michael was astonished, but didn't give up. But as a professional rock climber, he kept his emotions in control and his movements steady. In a rock climbing competition, no one was the winner until the last moment. Even if a climber was inches away from the top, he or she would fail immediately if the grip got loose and a mistake was made. At the moment, the two were so close that they could hear each other's loud heartbeats. "If I win, you will explain to the freshmen how the rock climbing club charges its members instead of luring them in," Jacob said coldly as he glared at Michael.
"Save your breath until you can beat me."
Michael glared back at Jacob and replied as he reached for a higher hold while spreading his limbs to their limits. Only highly skilled rock climbers could accomplish this spider-shaped movement. On the ground, Ryan and the others were holding their breaths. The last meter of the summit was the most challenging part. Standing far below, they had a clear view of the last few holds, which were more than half a meter from each other. Without leaping, the climbers couldn't reach any of them. However, leaping was a high-risk move during which the climbers could fall from the wall at the smallest misstep. Michael was well aware of the challenge at the last meter of the summit. It was a thin line between success and failure. He had the advantage of having climbed the same wall a lot of times in the past. He gulped, hesitating about the leap, as he couldn't afford to lose right now. Jacob was already a winner in people's eyes when he caught up with Michael after climbing down, and now Michael had to reach the summit to win back his honor. On the other hand, Michael was not absolutely sure if he could conquer the last meter. He had only a 50% success rate even during normal practice. He was cursing himself for setting the difficulty level to the highest to prevent anyone from reaching the summit and getting the prize. While he was weighing his options, Jacob had already measured the distance with his eyes and leaped up. It seemed that time had stopped when he leaped. Everyone looked at Jacob, who leaped into the air by kicking on 2 holds. Ryan and the other 2 belayers held the rope anxiously with sweaty hands. Jacob landed on the rock wall with one hand gripping one hold and one foot stepping on another. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. However, Jacob had gripped only 2 holds instead of 3, so he began to swing. "Oh!" Everyone gasped due to fear. It seemed that the audience's mouths and voices were no longer under their control. Putting more strength in his fingers and gripping the hold tightly, Jacob stabilized his body. Putting his free foot on a pocket in the wall, he leaned closely against it. Jacob heaved a sigh of relief. He let go of one hand and reached up to grip another hold. The most challenging part was over, and he would reach the summit after 2 easy steps. Watching him with red, bewildered eyes, Michael lost his composure completely. Taking 2 deep breaths, he leaped up for a hold above him and was able to grab it. "Yes!" The members of the rock climbing club, who had been holding back for the past 10 minutes, cheered. Their happiness was short-lived, as Michael's arm couldn't support his weight and his hand slipped. He fell from a position near the summit that was more than 10 meters in the air. The 3 belayers immediately tightened their grip on the rope and controlled Michael's fall. Meanwhile, Jacob took the last 2 steps and reached the summit successfully. Cheers exploded from the crowd as he finished yet another race against Michael and emerged victorious. Looking around at the students who were cheering in excitement, Sam had a feeling that the news of Jacob's legendary achievement would soon spread all over the university. Jacob waved his hand and descended slowly with the help of the rope. Michael had already reached the ground, and his face was purple with rage. It was obvious who had won the competition and who had not. Kyle, who had been emotionless during the whole competition, grinned suddenly. No wonder this guy could beat up half of the basketball team, he thought. Episode 95. Kyle. Jacob, who was taking off the harness, didn't notice Kyle's expression amongst the crowd. He slowly walked over to Michael and pointed his finger at the microphone by the table. We just agreed on something. He started to speak.
When did we agree on anything?
Michael stared at Jacob with a look so cold that it could cut through human bodies. Jacob had embarrassed him twice in front of a crowd. Michael was someone who valued his reputation more than anything else, and having it ruined for the second time was just making him angrier than he had ever been. If only looks could kill. Kathy saw that Jacob was walking towards Michael and immediately realized that he was about to pick up a fight. She hastily ran over to Jacob. She knew that he couldn't afford to get into another fight within the same month, no matter how influential he was, especially when his opponent was the deputy mayor's son. Kyle was just about to leave, but he stopped as he noticed the change in the situation. Jacob's safety meant nothing to him, but he couldn't leave his sister behind. Michael's anger decreased by half when he saw Kathy, especially when he noticed Kyle, who stood out from the crowd, staring at him. He didn't dare to make any impulsive moves. At least, he didn't dare to yell at Kathy. Maybe others were not aware of Kathy's status, but he, as one of the influential people in college, knew exactly what her background was. No one at school dared get in her brother Kyle's way. Even Lisa, who considered herself to be the most popular girl in college and didn't care about other girls' existence, would keep a distance from Kathy. It was because she learned from Michael that Kathy's older brother was Kyle, the captain of the school basketball team. "What's the matter?" Kathy asked Michael when she saw Jacob's slightly irritated expression. She and Michael kind of knew each other since they were both members of the student council.
Your friend here isn't satisfied with the prize he won. He's also trying to interfere with my club's management.
Michael tried hard to suppress his anger and said in an upset tone, "I don't care about the prize. However, you need to clarify your club's charges to the freshmen," Jacob said to him, firmly. The crowd circled the three of them as they saw a conflict emerge between Jacob and Michael. Everyone who was going to leave after the exhilarating competition stopped their tracks, hoping to see a fight. This afternoon break was turning out to be one of the most interesting ones.
What charges? It's $100 to enroll,
Michael insisted when he saw more people getting closer. All right, I'll say it if you won't. Jacob nodded as he walked to the table to grab the mic. Michael was getting really tired of Jacob. He reached out his arm in anger and tried to stop him. Jacob was equally upset. He pushed away Michael's arm without hesitation. Even though Michael was strong, his strength was nothing compared to Jacob's. After all, Jacob had to carry around 100 pounds on each of his wrists every day. Michael immediately got pushed aside and he almost fell. Jacob quickly picked up the mic, turned it on, and said to the crowd, "Whoever is considering joining the rock climbing club, listen carefully. The fee you are paying today is only the enrollment fee, and it does not include the fee you have to pay a week later. Not only that, the training and equipment will also not be provided for free."
I thought the $100 would cover everything. Do we have to buy our own equipment? I thought the club was going to provide it for us.
Sure enough, those who had just registered and those who were still considering it started to reconsider.
It's none of your business.
Michael dashed over. He whipped out his fist and aimed it at Jacob's forehead. However, it was stopped by a giant hand. He turned around and saw Kyle staring at him angrily from above, eyes wide open. Kyle was grasping onto his arm with his palm in a vice-like grip.
Kyle? He's the one who injured all your players. Why are you helping him? Demanded Michael.
That's between me and him, and I'll deal with that later. I'm not happy with you charging students with all the extra fees as well, Kyle said. This was the first time Jacob heard Kyle talk, and looked at him from such a close distance. Kyle's deep voice had an overwhelming sense of power, and those who didn't obey would be playing with fire. I don't want to join this rock climbing club anymore. Can I get a refund? A freshman asked Jacob timidly. Ask him. Jacob pointed at the vice captain of the club, who could do nothing but nod at this moment. Then, a couple of students who had just registered for the club got their refunds, one by one. They thought the enrollment fee was all it took to attend the rock climbing club, and had no idea that there would be a large number of hidden charges to follow. A set of rock climbing equipment, for example, would cost thousands. Not a lot of students could afford that. It's almost time. Let's get back to class, Jacob said after the issue had been taken care of, as he wiped off the sweat from his forehead.
Okay, let's go.
Sam was glad to see Jacob venting his anger, and he didn't want to stick around any longer after it was over. Jacob had always been the calm one among their group, always telling them, especially Sam, to keep their heads low and just get through the 4 years without getting into trouble. But lately, something had gotten into him. He was more confident than ever and was facing all the bullies head on. All the boys in his class were very proud of him and also in awe of his newfound physical strength. Jacob glimpsed at Michael, who was so mad that his eyes turned red. He finally chose to ignore him and simply walked out of there along with his friends.
Hey, you forgot your prize,
Kyle said in his deep voice. He grasped the set of black equipment and threw it at Jacob. Jacob caught it in his hands and tossed it into the air twice. Then he threw it back to Kyle and said, I don't need it. Kyle was very tall and strong, like a bull. He was forced back half a step by the 50-pound equipment that was thrown at him. He thought to himself,
this guy really has amazing upper body strength.
Jacob! Kathy jogged over to catch up with him. What's the matter, Kathy? Jacob turned around reluctantly. He was irritated with her for constantly interfering in his affairs. She was perfect, besides her interest in controlling too many things. You forgot these bracelets, she said, handing them over to Jacob. Jacob then suddenly remembered the bracelets he had just left beside the wall. Jacob quickly took them from her smooth hands and put them on his wrists. Jacob shivered at the thought of what would have happened if he had lost those bracelets. He had never taken them off till now, just because of the fear of losing them. But today he had to, and his fear almost came true. Although he had never tasted the feeling of the tightening necklace, he knew it wouldn't be the best feeling in the world. It was from Susan, after all, and it was no cheap treasure. She would never leave a life behind if she decided to kill. Thank you, Kathy. Jacob thanked her sincerely this time. Kathy noticed how much Jacob valued these seemingly ordinary bracelets, and she also caught him subconsciously touching the silver necklace that he never seemed to take off. She suddenly realized that the bracelets and the necklace seemed like a set. Are these gifts from Susan as well? Kathy thought to herself. Kathy, you must have class in the afternoon too. Go get some lunch before it's too late. Jacob laughed happily and said to her. His anger was now completely gone, and he walked away with his arm around Sam's neck. Kathy watched Jacob walk away, wondering if he had lied to her about Susan being his cousin. For a cousin, he sure seems to value her weird gifts more than anything else. But if she really is his girlfriend, then why would he lie to me? Kathy thought. She was lost in these thoughts and still standing in an empty sports stadium when her friend called her name to ask her to go with her to get lunch. Episode 96. A Friendly Match. The guys couldn't stop talking on the way to the cafeteria.
That was awesome. Did you see Michael's face, Jacob? It was so awful that it looked like he was going to burst into flames at any moment.
Sam shouted in excitement as he walked. Jacob simply smiled. Although he felt good too, he was not as excited as Sam. Since the guys at the rock climbing club played tricks on Sam to make him fall, it could have been a severe accident. If Sam had fallen on his own, Jacob wouldn't have had the opportunity to interfere with the excessive fees charged by the rock climbing club. He certainly knew that Kyle's presence was also the reason why Michael had kept quiet. Michael had to swallow his pride because even Kyle wasn't happy about the hidden fees being charged by the club. "Jacob, you are pretty awesome at rock climbing. Have you been practicing for years?" one of his classmates asked. "Practice? I've only ever seen it on TV," Jacob answered. However, he remembered that when he was little and stayed at his grandma's old home, he had rebelliously climbed onto the fences and trees thousands of times. They reached the cafeteria and continued talking all through lunch and finally headed to class. The news about the rock climbing competition where Jacob defeated Michael was all over the college. The students had been crazily forwarding the video of Jacob's climb and clips of his moves where he seemed to be moving like a pro as he made his way up the wall.
"A great reputation travels far,"
Sam sighed as he tried his hardest to think of a proper saying. It wasn't easy for him, since his grades were the worst amongst them. Jacob had no time to deal with all the remarks and looks. He was focused on getting his tutoring material ready, and he wondered how Sophie did on her midterms. When the class got over after 2 hours, students rushed out of the classroom. A few girls were still checking out Jacob on their way out. Some of them were only in their freshman year. "You are famous now, Jacob. Some of the pretty girls might want to become your girlfriend," one of the guys said, unable to hide the envy in his tone. As they spoke, a pretty girl who was well-dressed walked up to Jacob and handed him a note. "This is my number in case you want to talk sometime. I think you are pretty cool. I'm in my freshman year, planning to major in business, by the way," she said. She walked away and let out a nervous sigh in front of her friends. She whispered to one of them, curiously, "How did I do?"
"Whoa!"
Sam and the guys kicked up a fuss as they had never seen anything like this happen to Jacob before. Jacob coughed as he opened up the note. Then he rolled it up and threw it into the trash can in front of them. They didn't expect that. One of them shouted immediately, "What are you doing throwing it away? She's such a pretty girl. Plus, she approached you first." Jacob waved it off and said, in annoyance, all right, let's go already." If this would have happened a few months ago, Jacob would probably find it interesting and get worked up and excited. He would have opened up his phone and messaged her right away. However, as popular as he was now, Jacob found it annoying since so many students were interested in getting to know him. He wasn't Michael, who sought attention, after all. "Do you really have a girlfriend now?" One of his roommates caught up with him and asked. "You are getting more and more annoying. I'll just give all the notes to you to deal with in the future, all right?" Jacob looked at him with annoyance. "That's good. You do that." He kept on nodding. "I'll be your agent, and whoever wants to date you will have to date me first." Shameless. Jacob, Sam, and their other roommate hit him on the head at the same time.
But I do think you and Kathy would be a good match. You are from the same class and know each other pretty well already. We can tell that she cares a lot about you, Sam said to Jacob.
How can you possibly guess Kathy's thoughts? Jacob said. Kathy cared too much about everyone. She was also worried when Sam was climbing the wall. Whoa, so our Jacob does like Kathy, one of the guys cried out dramatically. Jacob shook his head. He didn't want to argue with them. These guys did no good, yet they were pretty good at ruining things. If they hadn't gone and confessed Jacob's so-called love for Kathy without permission a while ago, the relationship between them wouldn't have been so awkward to begin with. In the past few days, their friendship had just begun to get a little better. Jacob didn't want Sam and the guys to mess it up again. Jacob had more respect than a fondness for Kathy. She was a charming girl, and her outstanding abilities made her stand out. She was a good person who cared about everyone and had a brilliant mind. All these things made her the perfect girl in all the boys' eyes. Sam changed the topic when he realized Jacob didn't want to talk about it anymore.
It's still early. Let's go play basketball, he yelled.
Although he failed at rock climbing, his obsession with sports had awakened. Jacob didn't tell Sam that he might have succeeded in rock climbing if the members of the club hadn't messed with the equipment. He knew it would only make Sam upset.
Come along, Jacob.
Sam dragged his arm. I can't play basketball. Jacob shook his head.
You only need to know how to pass, dribble, and shoot the ball.
Dissatisfied, Sam knocked hard on Jacob's shoulder with his fist. All right, let's go. Jacob agreed to go with them at last. He felt bad for not hanging out with them enough lately because of cultivation and tutoring. Sam's execution ability was really worth mentioning. On one hand, he immediately called up Ryan and some other guys and told them to bring a basketball from the dorm. On the other hand, he quickly booked a basketball court with Jacob and his other two roommates. The guys gathered at the court at the same time. The college made a rule for the basketball team after the incident last time. Thus, one could rarely see them practicing on the courts outside. In addition, since they were to play a match next week, they had to train even more intensively due to the loss of a few of their star players. They played 4 against 4 on the half court, Sam's dorm against Ryan's dorm. Basketball wasn't really Jacob's strong suit. Basically, he would pass the ball whenever he got it, and he would shoot it at the basket when he couldn't pass it, since he didn't know how to dribble properly. He would score if he was lucky. If not, the rebound would be secured by Sam with his excellent leaping ability.
Don't just pass it, Jacob. Dribble and move around,
Sam yelled after securing 6 rebounds. He was out of breath. I don't know how to, damn it, Jacob answered as he bounced the ball like an elementary school boy. Sam rolled his eyes, but he had to admit that Jacob had a pretty good sense of positioning when he didn't have the ball. Sam always had a chance to throw the ball at Jacob for him to shoot. However, Jacob's shots weren't that good. They were mostly air balls, and he got the backboard or the basket only a few times. No one on their team knew how to play properly other than Sam, and they were making him look weak in front of the other team. Soon, Ryan's team learned about Jacob's weak aiming skills. They focused more on defending Sam and the other guys and left Jacob alone. It took a lot of energy for Sam to grab rebounds, and soon he was out of breath. Sam was upset when he noticed that they had fallen behind, even though their average skill level was higher than Ryan's. Jacob held the ball and saw that the other team entirely blocked his 3 teammates. He took another shot, seeing that he had no chance to pass the ball, and sure enough, it was another air ball. I told you I can't play basketball, and I'll only drag you guys down, Jacob murmured when he saw Sam's mad expression. At that moment, some dark clouds spread above him, blocking the bright sunshine. Jacob looked up at the sky instantly. However, instead of the clouds, he saw Kyle standing behind him, tall as a hill. Sam and the other guys realized the change in the situation, and they hastily threw away the basketball and gathered around Jacob. They still remember the last time Jacob beat several players on the basketball team. It was like yesterday when those players shouted madly in pain. Right now, the captain of the team was standing on the court with a stern expression. He wasn't supposed to be here. What could this possibly mean? Episode 97, Joining the Enemy. Kyle raised his hand, and all of Jacob's friends quickly ran over to him. They all thought that Kyle was going to hit him. However, Kyle simply pointed at Jacob and spoke in a calm yet determined tone. You have to join the basketball team." His demand stunned everyone, including Jacob. Of all the things they had expected him to say, this was definitely not on their list. They all thought that it was some kind of a cruel joke. Everyone knew that no one ever said no to Kyle, but after the last incident, the juniors, especially the sophomores, felt a little wary of anyone on the basketball team. "What the hell? Why are you ordering him to join the basketball team, and why should he obey your orders in the first place?" Before Jacob could even respond, Ryan shouted, along with the rest of his friends, who all got defensive on Jacob's behalf. Kyle ignored the yelling and the hostility and turned towards Sam. He pointed at him and said just as calmly, "You as well. Join the team." Sam was just as surprised as Jacob. It had been Sam's dream to play basketball for the university, but the team here had always been filled with rich kids and elites, and he never thought that he would even get a fair chance. Even if he did make the team, he would never be able to fit in the crowd or bear their snarky remarks and bullying the entire time, and so he never even tried. Kyle took out a little notebook from the pocket of his baggy sweatpants and read to Jacob. "Reaction, level S. Speed, level S. Arm strength, level SS. Positioning, level B. Passing, level C. Dribbling, level D. Shooting accuracy, level E." "What are you even calculating?" Jacob asked Kyle. Kyle turned to Sam without answering Jacob's question and continued. "Leaping, level A. Positioning, level A. Passing, level B. Dribbling, level A. Endurance, level A. Judgment, level B. Height, level D." Sam got straight A's and B's, except for a D for his height, for which he felt a little disheartened, but he knew he was a bit short for making the team. Despite his enthusiasm and talent for basketball, he was only 5.57 feet tall. He was unable to make his high school team because of his height. However, his height certainly didn't get in the way of him being popular and being liked by girls at school. Of course, being liked by high school girls was Sam's version of the story. Even if he did fib about being popular in school, his friends certainly believed him because currently, in college, he did get asked out by a lot of girls. He was always going to karaoke or dinner dates with them. But being selected in the basketball team was a whole other scenario. Kyle asking him to join the team was a dream come true for him. He was beyond thrilled. When Kyle saw the Rock Climbing Club's registration event outside of the stadium, he decided to make time to take a look and see if there were any physically strong freshmen. He was hoping to recruit some new players for his team, since he had recently lost his best players. He realized how talented one of the sophomores was when he saw Sam climb over 10 meters of the wall without any experience. At the very least, he learned how energetic and persevering Sam was. But before Kyle could approach him, the quarrel between Jacob and Michael began, and he couldn't say anything. After the somewhat impromptu competition between Michael and Jacob, he tried to locate both Jacob and Sam. He finally found out that they both were with their friends playing basketball in the outdoor court. At the time, he was training in the stadium, and so he came over to watch them play. When Kyle saw Sam's smooth shooting motion and excellent basketball skills, he knew that he had found himself a new star player. He didn't waste any time in taking both Jacob and Sam in his team, despite the continuous objections from their friends.
What is this ABCD you're reading out? Is this a multiple choice question?
A guy from Ryan's dorm asked in confusion, making himself look like a fool.
A, B, C, D, and E are levels in my rating system, and S is better than A, he said, pointing at Sam. And your basketball foundation is fairly impressive. You are quite promising as a sophomore.
Then he pointed to Jacob and said,
Your foundation is extremely poor, but your physical strength is exceptional.
Jacob was feeling pleased with himself for getting the validation of the strongest guy on the campus. He had figured out by now that Kyle only spoke to the point, and he would never waste his time talking to them if they weren't actually skilled.
I'm missing a few players in the game next week, so you need to serve as a last resort,
Kyle carried on, calmly, as if the opinion of those involved didn't matter to him at all. Jacob thought about it for a few seconds. After he made sure that Kyle wasn't there to pick a fight with them, he said, There's no problem if you want Sam on your team, but I don't know how to play at all.
You don't have a choice. One of the things the vice principal promised me when I removed my team members was that I could pick anyone for the game next week,
Kyle said to Jacob in his unwavering, calm voice. Jacob shook his head and replied, Even so. Kyle lifted his hands and interrupted Jacob.
A man should take responsibility for his actions. I didn't hold you responsible for injuring my team members. In addition, it was me who urged the school to suspend those idiots, he said.
He requested them to be suspended? Not only Jacob, but Ryan, Sam, and the others were all surprised.
You can check with Vice Principal Liam if you don't believe me,
Kyle said firmly. Jacob suddenly remembered that when he went to see Liam in his office, Kyle was there too. He realized that Kyle looked mad back then because his team members caused a lot of trouble. He wasn't mad at Jacob for injuring them. He was mad at them for starting the fight. Kyle didn't rush Jacob to make his decision, as he noticed that he was lost in his thoughts. He turned to Sam and asked, in a serious tone,
Are you willing to join the basketball team?
Sure, Sam agreed immediately. Kyle asked again, since he didn't hear the answer he was looking for.
Are you willing or not?
I'm willing to join the team. Sam gave a definite answer. The guys looked at Sam in surprise, as they didn't expect him to join the enemy team so quickly. He was just in an intense fight with the members of the basketball team not so long ago, yet he was eager to be a part of their team. However, Sam thought differently. Basketball was not only his hobby, but also his dream. He had just got an invitation from the captain of the basketball team who recognized his abilities. And since opportunities like these came only once in a lifetime, he had to seize it. Having gotten an affirmative answer from Sam, Kyle turned to Jacob again and asked,
How about you? Do you want to be a part of the game next week?
Jacob heard him clearly this time. Instead of asking him to join the team, Kyle was asking if he wanted to play in the game next week.
With your strength and quick reaction time, you could be a good fit for the team. You can be the temporary power forward. You'll be rebounding, defending, and blocking. We won't count on you for shooting and scoring. Simply put, you will be the hard labor in a restricted area.
Kyle laid it all out to Jacob without any embellishments. Jacob understood and felt relieved after hearing this. He really didn't want to embarrass himself or his university on the day of the match. Sounds like Kyle has been paying attention to me for a while now, he thought.
You, on the other hand, Kyle turned back to Sam and said, are quick in reacting and smooth in dribbling. You can also protect the ball well while dribbling since your center of gravity is lower.
Plus, with a good sense of space and timing, you can pass the ball by making use of gaps and errors in the other team's defense. You are a great fit as a point guard. Your accurate shooting skills can benefit you in this position even more. Kyle kept going on and on about how good Sam was. Even though Sam was short, Kyle couldn't stop praising him out loud. Sam's eyes got brighter and brighter. Although Jacob didn't understand the meaning of the whole spiel, Sam, as a basketball fan, knew that the point guards had the most opportunities to control the ball during the game. They were the core of the team. "Yes, I'm in," Jacob agreed without hesitation after seeing his buddy light up with excitement. He asked, "When do we start training?" Kyle couldn't help but laugh when he heard Jacob's question. "Your friend can start his training with the rest of the team starting tomorrow. As for you," he dragged out his voice before stating, "Kay can instruct you." Episode 98. Kyle's Strategy. "Kay?" Jacob asked in confusion. "Yes, Kathy, your class president," Kyle said, slightly gritting his teeth. Jacob and the others were stunned again. They didn't expect Kathy's name to come up in this conversation. Why would she train Jacob for basketball? "She's my sister. She isn't too good at the game, but good enough for a noob like you," Kyle said as he looked at Jacob. "Sister?" After some murmuring, the guys couldn't help but shout, "Sister!" When comparing the sweet and timid-looking Kathy to a brawny and buff Kyle, no one would believe that they were related. "This gorilla is related to Kathy? Our Kathy?" some of the guys thought. "Why are you all so surprised?" Kyle looked at them emotionlessly and asked. All of them immediately straightened up and shook their heads. Even though they had a huge advantage in number against Kyle, no sane person would want to get on his bad side. Jacob thought back to the morning when he rode the bicycle with Kathy in the back seat after they had spent the night at the karaoke place. They entered from the west entrance, and there were many hotels nearby. They bumped into Kyle, who was out on a morning run with his team. At that moment, Kathy was sitting in the back and was holding on to his lower waist. "That'll be all. You will come to the school's main entrance and gather with us at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll start with a morning run, and then you'll join the regular training," Kyle said to Sam. Then, he turned to Jacob and said, with his signature cold face, "I'll have Kay teach you the basic basketball moves one by one. Same time in the morning at 6 o'clock, and you'll train in the outdoor basketball court." After he said what he had to, Kyle didn't waste any more time on them and turned around to leave. By then, all of Jacob's friends had forgotten about their resentment towards Kyle and were intrigued by the prospect of getting one-on-one training from a beautiful girl like Kathy. One of the guys stopped Kyle and asked him courageously, "Hey bro, can I join the basketball team as well?" While saying so, he rolled up his sleeves and revealed the round muscles on his shoulder. "Look, I'm strong too, and I'm also tall," he added. Kyle glanced at him and interrupted his dreams with one sentence. "You still have a long way to go." Then, the captain of the basketball team turned around and walked away steadily. Soon, everyone on the court could only look at his towering figure from afar. The guy who approached Kyle was struck badly by his disdainful sentence. He turned to Sam and asked, "Ain't I strong? Don't forget your brothers now that you're on the basketball team and all. Sam, you have to recommend me." His eagerness to join the team seemed to have helped him forget how he looked at Sam as a traitor just a minute ago when Sam agreed to join the basketball team. Everything happened all of a sudden, and it took Ryan and the others a while to get all the facts straight. Sam was recruited to the basketball team, and Jacob would play in the basketball game for their university in the coming week. Furthermore, Sam was going to attend the training, and Jacob would be instructed by Kathy on the basic basketball moves. But the biggest shocker of all was that the beautiful Kathy was actually Kyle's younger sister. Not only were Ryan and the others dazed, but Sam himself was also confused. He didn't expect that fighting with the members of the basketball team would bring him such fortune. He got Kyle's attention and was recruited to the basketball team to fill the vacancies. In addition, he was getting the most important position on the team, the point guard. However, none of them knew that Kyle was really eager to recruit Jacob for next week's game. Only his level of stamina and strength could help them with this tough battle when the main players were missing. Kyle's original intention had been to punish the people who damaged his team so badly, but seeing both of them in action today made him change his plans. Winning was the most important thing to him, no matter who played. Even though Sam had potential, it would take time to train him. Fortunately, Jacob understood the meaning of a bundled sale of his friend and himself. Kyle only praised Sam on the surface, but he actually thought highly of Jacob. He wouldn't have recruited Sam either if Jacob had refused to join the team. Since the training would be very tough, he didn't want to make it seem like he was avenging what had happened earlier. That was why he had his sister instruct Jacob instead of putting him on the basketball team for the intensive training. He didn't praise Jacob because he was afraid that Jacob would get too confident and cocky. As a matter of fact, the key to winning the game next week was Jacob. Kyle wasn't stupid. He had a thoughtful and steady way of dealing with things. If not, how could he otherwise lead the basketball team of their university to the championship in the National College Basketball League? He had to play his cards very carefully if he wanted to take full advantage of Jacob's potential and still keep the position of power to himself. On the other hand, Jacob wasn't stupid either. He accepted Kyle's request because he wanted to help his friend, Sam. He understood Kyle's game and couldn't let it affect Sam. He was planning to help Sam score a lot in next week's game. Even though he didn't know much about basketball, he knew Sam's performance in the first game would determine his future on the basketball team. "Sam, you gotta treat us now that you've successfully gotten on the basketball team." The guy, who couldn't be on the basketball team, yelled to Sam in distress.
"Do you ever think about anything other than free food?"
Sam hit the guy's head with his hand, turned around, and told Ryan,
"Call everyone from our floor. I'll treat you guys."
He couldn't stop smiling. Good luck had just dropped from the sky. He brought Jacob to play basketball and got scouted by the basketball team's captain. If he did well in the next week's game and became a permanent member of the basketball team, he would have a chance to play in the National College Basketball League. After this incident, they weren't in the mood to play more basketball. Ryan wanted to go back and spread the news, and Sam was also in a rush to tell his friends from high school about his great news. Thus, everyone dispersed. When Ryan brought his basketball back to the dorm, Sam went to invite his high school friends, who were also studying at their university, and the rest of Sam's roommates followed Ryan to join in on the fun. Jacob saw that it was almost 4 o'clock, so he thought for a while and decided to meet Susan. Ever since Susan put the heavy bracelets on his wrists, Jacob didn't dare to go into her office again. However, it wouldn't work if he kept on avoiding her. After all, he still needed her to advise him on cultivation. Although Elder Liam was kind, he was really busy, and Jacob didn't want to trouble him too often. Jacob came to the door of Susan's office exactly at 4 o'clock. He knocked on the door, heard Susan say, "Come in," and pushed the door open to go inside. Susan was sitting on a chair while leaning against the window. Resting her legs on top of a stool, she was reading a magazine. She didn't even look up once Jacob stood in front of her, staring awkwardly. She just turned a page in her magazine and said casually, "Start your cultivation." "Oh, okay." Jacob walked over to the empty chair across from her and sat down on it. Before he closed his eyes, Jacob looked at Susan, who sat in front of him, again. He saw her grabbing the coffee cup on the windowsill and flipping through the magazine as she took a sip. If she wasn't a teacher, Susan could have actually been a model. Jacob had a random thought. Susan seemed to have sensed Jacob staring, so she said, while reading, "You were in the spotlight today." "Are you talking about the rock climbing club?" Jacob asked, to be sure. "What else could it be?" Susan asked rhetorically. Jacob smiled and didn't say anything. He thought Susan didn't really care about other matters and only cared about cultivation. It didn't seem that an inspector like her was actually aware of everything that happened on campus, but she was. "Did you go to the Dragon Palace last weekend?" Susan asked. "Yeah," Jacob said, nodding. Jacob was actually a little afraid of Susan. She was no doubt a secret agent of the Dragon Tribe. The inspector's abilities at information gathering were very intimidating, and so he decided to shut his eyes and begin cultivating. Episode 99. Serious Danger. "Come here," Susan thought for a moment before waving at Jacob. Jacob walked up to her. No matter if she called him with a good intention or a bad one, avoiding her command would be useless. She held up Jacob's wrist as if she was trying to sense something. Jacob was a little nervous about being this close to her. The last 2 times he was this close to her, it had not worked out well for him. He didn't want to be trapped in another piece of jewelry by her. "Your heart is beating very fast," Susan said indifferently. "That's because I don't really trust you," Jacob replied. Susan raised her head and stared at Jacob before saying, "How sweet." Then she added, sarcastically, "If you want, I can put 2 more bracelets on you, or maybe an earring this time." "Oh no, please don't." Jacob gave in quickly. Seeing that the person in question was Susan, he knew that she most likely wasn't joking, and he didn't need any more so-called gifts from her than he already had. Susan let go of Jacob's arm after a while and said, "You've improved since last time, but 2 meridians' ends were split in the wrong direction. Try feeling it yourself." Jacob followed her instructions, worked the natural essence in his body using the spirit concentration scroll, and felt the slight clog in the 2 spots she was talking about. However, there were only 3 to 4 small acupoints in those spots, so Jacob was able to open them up in no time after guiding the nature essence in his body through them. The spirit concentration scroll formed a perfect cycle and circulation in his body, and it immediately made Jacob feel an increase in the speed of circulation. Seeing Susan looking down at the magazine again, Jacob admired her and felt grateful. He wouldn't have been able to overcome these little problems if it wasn't for her guiding him. After all, I do need a master to coach me. If I tried to explore it myself, I would never be able to find out that something is wrong with my meridians. It would also take much longer for me to break through the 3rd level of the spirit concentration scroll on my own. Even Dracon instructed me on cultivation, but he didn't spot any issues with my meridians. This is proof that Susan's level is even stronger than Dracon's, he thought. Seeing Susan ignoring him again, Jacob returned to his seat and prepared to concentrate on cultivation. He was about to close his eyes, but he thought for a while and couldn't help but ask, "Susan, you're not cultivating today?" Susan raised her head and looked at him. "You really think I am a cultivation freak, don't you? I too need to rest sometimes. Besides, you would affect my cultivation in some way when you are here," she said in a straightforward manner. Jacob forced a smile. Even though this teacher's level was high, her attitude was not exactly the best. He closed his eyes and was about to cultivate, but again couldn't when Susan suddenly said, "Do you know about Soph's birthday party?" "Isn't it next month?" Jacob asked. "Yeah, I already received an invitation. The scale of Soph's birthday party will be huge this time, and many important figures who otherwise live in seclusion will be there," Susan said. "Is it because it is her 15th birthday and an important year for her?" Jacob asked. Susan snorted lightly at the naive question. "It's not as simple as you think. If it were just a normal party, I wouldn't be talking to you about it." Jacob sensed the condescending tone and asked, "What do you mean?" "This gathering seems like Soph's birthday party on the surface, but it's actually an event to compare the strengths of the different clans, especially the North Atlantic and the South Atlantic. Dracon visited and invited many important masters to come out and help. The appearances of these influential figures would indicate where they stand." Seeing Susan saying this solemnly, Jacob became serious as well. "Does it mean the start of a war?" he asked. "It's not as severe as a war, but small-scale fights will definitely happen. Even though these two clans seem friendly to each other, their relationship has deteriorated over the years. Our clan's businesses on land are doing way better than theirs, but in terms of cultivation, the South Atlantic is better than us." "Isn't Sophie's Uncle Kenneth very powerful?" Jacob asked. Susan nodded her head and explained, "It is because of him that the South Atlantic doesn't dare do anything reckless. Kenneth is the #1 master in the human realm. Other than those old cultivators who haven't shown themselves in thousands of years, no one could defeat him." "Kenneth is really that strong?" Jacob was shocked again. After hearing both the flattery from General Arthur in the Dragon Palace and the Heavenly Master Susan, Jacob felt very differently about Kenneth. He hadn't taken him as seriously till now because of their mutual dislike for each other, but from now on, Jacob made a mental note to be more careful around the man. "No wonder he's so arrogant. That man is invincible in the human realm," Jacob thought. "However," Susan changed her tone to a grave one, "Kenneth's heavenly tribulation will be next month. If Kenneth can pass through the heavenly tribulation and become a heavenly dragon, the South Atlantic will still be intimidated for a while. If not..." She trailed off mid-sentence for effect. Jacob's mood became solemn as her tone changed. He was still new to this world, and finding out that there was possibly going to be a war in the future was intimidating to him, to say the least. Especially knowing that, being the Dragon King, Dracon's family would be at the forefront of it all. Since he was truly invincible in the human realm, Kenneth's heavenly tribulation would definitely be very tough. "And don't think that you'll be fine as Dracon's son-in-law. If the two clans start fighting, they may not even be capable of protecting Soph," Susan stated plainly. "Will Sophie be in danger despite being the king's daughter?" Jacob's heart skipped a beat. "Actually, both the clans have held grudges against each other for a long time, and Soph is like the spark that sparked the bomb. And you," Susan stared at Jacob and said, "just became Soph's fiancé at a time like this." Jacob's heart skipped another beat. "I'm not too sure what Dracon is thinking at the moment. If he's preparing for the worst, then he will be handing Soph to your care," Susan said. Jacob didn't speak. He was thinking hard. At this moment, his mind suddenly felt confused, and he was no longer in the mood to cultivate. "Which side are you on?" Jacob asked her after a few seconds. "I'm an inspector. Theoretically, I need to maintain the orderliness of the whole dragon tribe. If they really start fighting, I can only remain neutral. Both, North and South, are powerful forces and can't be stopped by 1 or 2 inspectors," Susan replied. Jacob fell into thought again. After a few moments of silence, he asked Susan, "What should I do?" Susan left him with 4 words: "Work harder to cultivate." And, in all reality, that was the best thing he could do. If he worked hard enough and became strong enough over time, he would at least have a chance of protecting Soph and himself. Jacob didn't expect this kind of response. However, when he thought again, there was nothing else he could do. Other than trying to raise his strength, he couldn't do anything more. These internal fights of the Dragon Tribe couldn't be controlled by the secular forces. "During Soph's birthday party next month, many important figures, as well as other inspectors, will appear in various forms. As an impure essence, you will be easily detected by them. However, as Soph's fiancé, you have to be there. In other words," Susan dragged out her words, "if you haven't achieved at least the first level of cultivation successfully to prove that you're a member of the Dragon Tribe, you'll be in some pretty serious danger." Serious danger. Susan said those 2 words, syllable by syllable. From Kenneth's behavior, it is easy to judge the attitude these masters have towards ordinary human beings. Jacob sighed. How did I get into the middle of all this? Jacob wondered. His forehead was full of sweat as he closed his eyes and concentrated on cultivating the most fundamental cultivation technique, the Spirit Concentration Scroll. Susan, who sat in front of him, sighed deeply. She looked down at her hands and thought, if this guy can't reach the first level in time, should I help him? She was conflicted because, as an inspector, she wasn't supposed to help one tribe. But Dracon and Helen had literally raised her, and she couldn't just sit and watch their son-in-law die like a fly smashed under a swatter. Episode 100. The Guest List. Jacob found the conversation with Susan quite disturbing and tried to shrug it off. He tried to concentrate on his cultivation instead of the dangers lurking on the North Atlantic Dragon Clan. He shut his eyes and cultivated in Susan's office for hours until the vibration of his phone disturbed him at 7 o'clock sharp.
"Where are you, Jacob? Come for dinner at the barbecue restaurant. I'm paying,"
Sam cried out in excitement over the phone. I think I'll pass. There's something else I need to do, Jacob said calmly.
Damn it! What's more important than me being selected in the basketball team?
Sam asked aggressively. He was still clearly high on the endorphins from before. It's just something really important. I'm sorry, Jacob said apologetically. Sam tried to convince him, but Jacob still said no, and dejectedly, Sam let it go. Time's up. I'm out. Jacob stood up and said to Susan after he realized it was already 7 o'clock. Okay, Susan nodded. Seeing that Susan didn't have anything else to say, Jacob left her office and took the bus to Sophie's place. Today was the day she got her midterm results. Being the person who had been tutoring her, and also someone who was going to marry her in a few years, Jacob's complete attention was only on her. He wanted to know her score as soon as possible. Jacob knew that the dinner with Sam wouldn't end all that early, so he chose to meet Sophie instead of his friends. The front door was half open for Jacob when he got there. He walked in and saw Helen putting several dishes on the dining table. Hi, Jacob greeted her. Jacob, you are here. Dracon went to pick Soph up from her friend's place, and they should be back soon as well. Helen smiled lightly and said. Jacob hesitated a bit, but after a few minutes, he asked, Helen, it is Soph's birthday next month, right? Yes, I thought she would tell you about it. Why? Are you planning a gift for her? Helen asked casually as she laid out the plates on the table. Will there be a lot of people that day? Is the South Atlantic clan coming as well? Aren't the North Atlantic and South Atlantic not getting along? Jacob asked a row of questions together. Did Susan tell you all this? Helen laughed. There's no need to worry. You are already a part of our clan, and we sure won't let anyone hurt you. Helen lightly mussed his hair to comfort him, as she always did with Soph. When she still saw a worried look on Jacob's face, she said, Don't overthink. Just act normal. If anything happens, Dracon and I will take care of it. Okay, Jacob nodded. After Helen's comforting words, there wasn't much that he could say. It seemed like there were indeed some conflicts between the two clans. However, Helen and Dracon didn't want Sophie and him to take on any pressure just yet. After some time, the main door of the house opened and Sophie entered with Dracon following behind her. She smiled as soon as she saw Jacob in the room. A little blush also appeared on her face as she recalled their conversation from last night. Everyone go wash your hands and let's have dinner, Helen said to them. After the four of them had sat down at the table, Helen asked Jacob how his grandma was doing back home. Then, she asked if the tutoring for Sophie got in the way of his own studies. She was acting sweetly, as she always did, and seemed to have forgotten about how she scolded them just this morning. Jacob answered each question politely, whereas Sophie was silent the whole time and was only focusing on her food. Helen then turned to Dracon and asked him about the invitations to Soph's birthday party. The last time I went back to the Dragon Palace, I had sorted out the list and asked General Arthur to send out the invitations. So far, the South Pacific, the East Arctic, and the South Atlantic are all attending. A few river dragon kings, who are located further away, will send their congratulatory gifts. Several lake dragon kings will show up as well, Dracon said. How many people from the South Atlantic are coming? Helen asked. About 50 of them. And their great master will be coming in person, too, Dracon said as he picked up some vegetables with his spoon. Hasn't he been living in isolation for the last 100 years for cultivation? Why is he attending? Helen asked. Because of the incident, Dracon said in disdain. Helen slightly frowned and shook her head. At least we don't have to be afraid of him because Kenneth is going to be there, she said. That's true, but the biggest problem is not their great master. It's the inspectors from different regions. Susan has a good relationship with us, and she has never caused any trouble for the North Atlantic. But it's hard to say if the other inspectors will spare us, Dracon said seriously. Helen was about to say something, but pointed at the dishes when she realized Jacob was listening attentively. Let's talk about it later, she said. Jacob thought to himself, Sophie's birthday is going to be a huge event. It looks like many powerful dragons are going to be present, and it might cause trouble. Oh, I met Soph's class advisor when I picked her up from school earlier today, Dracon said, all of a sudden. Yeah, I was just about to ask. How was it? Soph's midterm results should be out, right? Helen was suddenly excited. It's out, but her class advisor didn't tell me about it. She said that she wanted to meet with all the parents separately tomorrow evening to discuss all the students' progress, since they are in their senior year now, Dracon said. While her parents were discussing her midterms, Sophie was eating with her head down, pretending she didn't hear them at all. Seeing this, Jacob assumed that she did terribly on her exams. Tomorrow evening? That is such short notice. I have been working on a design lately and won't be able to make time for it tomorrow. Can you go instead?" Helen asked.
"I know you are busy these days, but I am arranging everything for Soph's birthday, and I have to pay a visit to an elder from the deep forest. You know how some of them wouldn't come if I didn't go with the invitation myself. Once I'm there, he will insist on playing chess and will go on chatting with me. I don't even know when I'll be able to get back," Dracon replied.
Helen sighed. "Tomorrow is the deadline for submitting the blueprint for the community center project, and I really want to get the bid. There are only 5 architectural design studios from all over the state that got the opportunity to bid for it." "You guys don't have to go. It's not that important," Sophie said as she continued looking down. Seeing their daughter feel neglected, Helen and Dracon looked at each other helplessly. Just when Helen was about to give up her plan to bid for the design, Jacob said, "I could go on your behalf." Dracon and Helen looked at Jacob at the same time. Then they looked at each other and nodded thoughtfully. "That's good. I think, since you've been helping Soph with her studies, it'll actually be nice if you're there." Helen nodded at Jacob and said, "Please go on our behalf this time, Jacob."
"The meeting is at 5 in the evening tomorrow. Please don't be late," Dracon said.
Jacob suddenly thought of Sophie's Uncle Kenneth and how irritated he was the last time Jacob went to Sophie's school. But then he remembered that man's temper. It would be a miracle for him not to offend the teachers. Dracon would not let him go to the meeting at all. He would explode in rage if the teachers said something even remotely bad about Sophie, and he could easily destroy the school in a snap. After the matter was settled, they chatted for a little while before getting up. Dracon and Helen stayed downstairs to discuss a few more things, while Jacob followed Soph upstairs to get started with her tutoring. They settled on her desk to study. He took the books out and said, "We will continue focusing on English today." Sophie rested her arms on the desk and her chin on her hand. Her eyes fell on something on Jacob's side and got transfixed at the spot. "The lesson for today is..." Jacob opened his book and started the lesson. However, Sophie stood up all of a sudden and ran out of the room. What is this girl doing? She is so hard to understand sometimes. Jacob was confused by her behavior. Sophie rushed back into the room just when Jacob was about to go after her. She almost ran into his arms. "What are you doing?" Jacob asked as he sat back down at the desk after she came back. "Here." She handed something to Jacob. Jacob realized that she had handed him a Band-Aid. He asked in confusion, "What are you giving me this for?" "For your wound," Sophie said, pointing at his elbow. Jacob lifted his arm but didn't see the injury. He touched where he couldn't see with his right hand and felt the pain. I didn't even know that I was injured, Jacob thought. Not sure if I got injured during rock climbing or got scratched while I was playing basketball today. He looked down at the Band-Aid on the desk and said to Sophie with a smile, "Thanks." Sophie smiled back at him and ripped open the Band-Aid to help him put it on the wound. Jacob was moved by the fact that Sophie cared for him so much now. She ran to get first aid as soon as she saw the wound. Then, she also helped him put it in the right spot, without even having to ask her.